today, live from my little kitchen table in Redding, California. So excited to be here with you guys. It's going to be such a fun time today. Hope you all are doing well. It is Friday. Yep, had to think about that one. Anybody else? This whole week has been like that. I have no idea what day it is, but I do know it's a good day. It's Friday. And we're going into a 3-day weekend. I believe President's Day is on Monday, which is always fun, knowing you're going to get a little bit of extra sleep and rest. So, anyway, so happy to be here. It's going to be a fun time. If you guys don't know me, I'm the project manager of Igniting Hope Ministries. I've been working for Steve and Wendy for about 5 years now. And I kind of do all admin things behind the scenes, plan the events, send out the emails, all that kind of stuff. So I love being the project manager. I love working for Steve and Wendy. It's such a treat. By far the best job I've ever had. And I don't plan on going anywhere soon. Love Igniting Hope. I really do. It's great. Love Steve and Wendy. They're incredible. If you guys have had the pleasure of meeting them in person, they really are the same on stage and off stage. They're the same in the car as they are online. They're just absolutely solid people and incredible to work for. So super grateful for my job. So today we're going to talk kind of a fun subject. I just wanted to share 5 things that I've learned specifically, but that my husband and I have learned in marriage so far. We've been married just over a year and a half, which I know isn't a horribly long time, but also you learn a lot in that first part of marriage. They always joke that the first year of marriage is hardest, which, I didn't come into agreement with that. I don't have faith for my marriage to be hard, but at the same time, there is some truth in the idea that you have to learn a lot in a short amount of time about communication, about sharing space with someone, just about having someone else always around. It is a lot of learning in that first year. So we're going on 2 years, and I feel like we've done a really good job. And so these tools can be things that are for married couples. Maybe they're things you guys already know, and you can even drop your own tips in the comments, things you've learned about communication, things you've learned about emotions or about yourself. Feel free. If you've been married, if you are married, drop some things in the comments of things that you've learned just to help people. I want this to kind of be like a supportive, interactive place this morning of just sharing some wisdom from the Lord. So it's going to be really fun. Just jumping on here. Good morning, Shanna. Hopefully I'm saying your name right, Shanna or Shauna. And Paul, great to see you. Love seeing you guys on. So before I jump in, I wanted to talk about our marriage conference that we just had last weekend. A lot of you were probably a part of it. It was by far, in my opinion, the most impactful event we've ever done at Igniting Hope Ministries. And we have a lot of really cool stuff going on, but that was just incredible. Healthy families impact culture. They really change the world. They impact people around them. It's so powerful. So it was such a dynamic time because our whole team added to the conference. So Steve and Wendy had some main sessions. And if you've heard of Steve and Lorraine Box, they have an incredible ministry. And they had a mind-blowing session. It was so good. They actually were Luke and my premarital counselors before we got married. So it was really fun to see them come in with their own piece of the pie. And then Melinda and Peter, you guys might have seen them around a little bit. They're part of our 3rd-year team this year. They had an incredible session where they went into extreme vulnerability about their story. They have a major redemption story where there was infidelity and God redeemed them, walked them through deliverance, and they have one of the most beautiful marriages I can think of. It's really special. So they had sessions, and then our 3rd-year team piped in. They had 15-minute sessions. Me and Luke got to share about our journey and about some of my struggles when we first got together. So it's just like session after session after session. It was 2 pretty much 12-hour days, which is so special because it is packed full of content. So if you guys didn't join, don't worry, because I'm not rubbing it in your faces about all the great stuff you guys missed. There will be an opportunity for you guys to jump into that amazing content as well. So we're prioritizing first. We're getting the recordings out to everyone who attended live. And so our goal was to do that within 2 weeks. So hopefully early next week, we'll have all of that out, if not today. But then we want to actually make it available to everyone else. And so if you couldn't join, don't worry. We'll be sending out an email soon about how to just buy those recordings as a package. And so if you missed it, don't worry. There's still a chance to be able to buy that amazing resource. And we're talking about ways to distribute it to groups as well. So that way, if you have a group of 40 people, who want to watch it. Not everybody has to buy it. We can chat about group rates. There's all kinds of cool stuff we're brewing up because it is really, truly, objectively, some of the best content I've ever heard on marriage and relationships. And we have some single people on our team too. So it's about how to learn to love yourself in a single season, how to prepare for marriage, how to hold hope when you're single and dating is just not working. So it really does. And actually, we have someone who's been divorced on our team. So they also have a session. It really includes anyone who has been married, wants to be married, is currently married in an amazing marriage, is married in a marriage that is maybe there's a struggle right now. It's really for everyone. So if you guys are not signed up for a newsletter, I highly recommend that. You can go to ignitinghope.com and just sign up. And you'll get, we send out 2 newsletters each week. The first one on Mondays is a blog from Steve and a podcast. Every week he writes a new blog and records a new podcast. It's really incredible. I'm so impressed. I remember when I first started working for him and I was like, wow, can you really do that every week? And 5 years later, he still is like pushing out incredible content every single week. It's so cool. I'm like, man, that's great. So that's one of our best resources, completely free blog and podcast every week. And then Thursdays, we send out updates about what we're doing at Igniting Hope Ministries. So if you're signed up for a newsletter, you'll automatically get both of those each week. And you can choose, if you don't want to hear from one of them, there's ways to mute one of the emails because we don't want to fill up your inbox, but we do want to make sure you hear about the cool things we have going on here at Igniting Hope Ministries. So anyway, that will be available soon. We'll send out an email the second it's available for purchase because this is some good stuff, truly, objectively. I know I'm on staff, but if I weren't on staff, I'd probably be talking about it just as excited because it's some really impactful content. So we're on at kind of a random time. We're on at 10 a.m. Usually we tend to be on quite early in the morning to try and catch people before work or the afternoon to catch people after work. But sometimes we like to switch up our times and see if there's a different audience that we can catch of people who might not usually be able to be on because we have people from all over the world in different time zones. So this is the 10-11 a.m. crowd. Great to see you, everyone. This is so fun. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. For those who maybe are just now joining, I'm just sharing 5 keys that I've learned since being married. These are things my husband and I have both talked about a lot. It's really helped us learn to grow as individuals as well. And so this is, like I said, relevant for those who are married, but even if you're not, if you have a roommate or if you have a coworker, I think these are great keys just for relationships and communication in general. And again, if you guys are joining, I'm just inviting people too to share their tips for healthy marriage and communication in the chat because I just kind of want to have a little bit of a dialogue time and just a great little resource center here for people who might learn from other people because I think everybody has, everyone has keys that we don't have. Everybody has skills that we don't have. We really need each other. And even if you've only been married for 1 day or if you've been married for 70 years, I believe we can all learn something from each other. And even if you're not married, like I said, you have people in your life who you communicate with, people who are around you, probably people you live with, and relationships take effort sometimes. I think a lot of people say relationships and being married is hard work. I more like to say it's effort because it feels like effort that I want to give. It doesn't feel like it's like sucked from me and I have to give this hard work to love my husband. It's actually easy because I love him. And so even though it does take effort, sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, I want to serve my husband well. So this is what I'm going to do, even though it's not what I have chosen to do, or this is the choice he feels like we're supposed to make. Maybe not what I would have picked, but I want to actually submit to my husband and let him take the lead in this one. So I'm going to follow him, even if it's not the choice I would make. There's things like that where it feels like it costs you, but it's also an honor for that because that's actually such a beautiful thing to have people in your life that you get to give something up for. And I think it's good for us too, honestly, because it's not all about us. And if we don't have people in our life who actually need things from us and who require things from us, then I think we have a danger to have some narcissistic tendencies because the world kind of revolves around us, right? And I think it's so beautiful to have relationships in our life that actually cost us and give us a reason to take the attention off ourselves. How can I give to this person? How can I support this person? How can I consider this person? I think it's such a beautiful thing to focus on someone else and to give out our love, even if it feels like it costs. And so 5 keys that we have learned Some of these have come just kind of over time. It's just this things that developed. And then other of these have been a really revelatory conversation where Luke and I are having a chat and we're like, oh my gosh, we just realized this. This is going to change the game. And so I'll start out with saying Luke and I, we don't have too many arguments, but also we do. I feel like it's concerning if you're in relationship with anyone for an extended amount of time and you don't ever have anything you could disagree on. I think it's a sign of emotional intimacy that you bump into things that you maybe don't agree with. So Luke and I like to call those bumpy conversations because they're not necessarily a fight. You know, we're not yelling at each other. We're not super angry. There's no like chaos happening. But at the same time, it's a little bit more than just a chat about something. Like we might have our emotions might be at higher levels and maybe it feels like a little bit more high stakes. Maybe there's some like maybe one of our emotions or something got triggered in us. And so we're having a little bit more of a reaction than we would be having with just a normal conversation. So I think a great example of that would be actually this is a perfect example. The other night I was feeling really overwhelmed because I had so many things to do and it was getting late and I needed to go to bed and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to feel so overwhelmed at all the things I need to do, and we're not going to get enough sleep tonight, and it just kind of was building. And then I started feeling frustrated because I was helping Luke get his breakfast ready for the next morning because he gets up very early and goes to work. And it's so funny because I was feeling really frustrated. And so in that moment, instead of being like, hey, honey, I'm like totally aware of my process and my emotions, and I feel so peaceful and so happy right now. And so, honey, I think could you do this for me? Would you mind helping me out? Instead of being able to have like a super like calm, present conversation, which is our normal state, honestly. You know, when we're happy, when we're not triggered about something, we try to be good communicators. I feel like that's what most people strive for, is to be a good communicator. But sometimes when you're really frustrated and you have really high emotions, things don't come out as kindly as you want them to. You might not be as self aware as you'd like to be. There might be things happening in your heart and in your mind that you're not necessarily connected with yet. You haven't even got a chance to process it. It's just kind of happening in the moment. And so I actually was feeling really frustrated and I told Luke, I feel like I have to make your breakfast for you. I feel like I have to get this ready. And that feels really hard for me because I have a lot of other things going on. And so it came out in a little bit more of a harsh way. It wasn't super loving. And it also didn't come with like really helpful information. It was more just like, I feel like I have to do this and I'm really frustrated right now. It's kind of how it came out. Just being super transparent because I know we all have those moments. And I think if we don't talk about them, then I think it can build a little bit of like shame and a little bit of just like low grade feelings of I'm a bad spouse, I'm a bad housemate, I'm a bad sibling because I don't always have these euphoric feelings about this person I live with. And so, anyway, afterwards, I went and took a second, took some breaths, and I had to ask myself, okay, what's really going on? And I realized that Luke actually never expected me to do these particular things for him, like get his breakfast ready. Obviously, I want to serve him, and we have like broken up the house chores. We have like things where we do that for each other, and I love getting to do that. To do that, Luke does the cooking, I do the dishes and the cleaning. Luke does the budgeting. Like we have split things really fairly, so this wasn't a normal task. This was like an extra thing, and I realized that I had this belief that I was being a bad wife if I didn't take care of everything to make his life easier, because it comes from a pure place. All I want to do is make his life better and improve it, right? But actually it was from a sense of obligation, and a feeling that I had to do it, and I thought that was coming from him. But actually in the conversation he said he's never expected me to do that. And so it was so helpful to have that clarifying moment. But that's what I would call a bumpy conversation, where emotions are a little bit higher. You're not necessarily like thinking at your greatest level, right? And so that was us. And then we were able to sit down, talk through it, and it worked out really well. So these are some kind of great keys that are relevant to conversations like that, or just to like things you might bump into. And even right now, I'm hearing someone is getting set free from feeling like you're being a bad friend. Because there might be moments where you're it could be a bad friend, bad spouse, bad sibling, whatever, but I'm hearing that that's being broken off of someone, and that you're actually being set free from any kind of sense of obligation, or a sense of feeling that you're doing a really bad job. You can trust your pure heart, and it's okay to have bumpy moments. It really is okay. It's okay to have high emotions. It's okay to not communicate things at the highest level. You're doing your best, and you can just continue to grow. You'll get better. It's going to be all right. There's so much room for you to grow. God's not afraid that you're a human. He's not afraid of your humanity. If he wanted you to be perfect, he could have made a robot, but he wanted a human. And that process is beautiful. So we just release that freedom, break off that shame. You can just do better. You don't have to feel bad about it. So here are these 5 keys we've learned in marriage. I think these are helpful for any relationship. Number 1 is you can have great intentions and you can still hurt each other. This was something that was truly mind blowing for me and Luke. This was one of those moments where we were having a bumpy conversation like that, and it just like exploded. It was like revelation, because sometimes it can be really difficult to be trying your very, very best and still the person you're speaking to, your friend, your spouse, your parent, whatever, their feelings still get hurt. Even though on the inside, your heart has all the best intentions in the world, you had a really pure heart, you didn't mean to hurt their feelings, you actually think you communicated really well, and they still get hurt. That can be really discouraging sometimes, because you're like, I'm trying my best, I don't understand. Like, why are your feelings still hurt? And this revelation was so helpful, because we realized that if someone's feelings are hurt about something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a reflection on us. It's actually more about what's going on inside them. And it helps because the other person is allowed to have whatever process they need to have. Just because I had a pure heart in my delivery of something doesn't mean that they're not allowed to have their feelings hurt. Because I think both of us, this happened on both sides, where we would be like, oh, wait, I didn't mean it that way, so your feelings can't be hurt. Of course, we would never say it like that. But there's a little bit of offense where it's like, I didn't mean it like that. Why are you taking it like that when that's not how I meant it? But realizing that we all have different lenses, we all have different life experience, we all have different communication ways. And so they might be saying one thing from this experience. My parents always used to say this. This is what I know it means. This is what I meant from my heart. It's just a beautiful, super pure place. But it has to go from their mouth through my lens of how I see the world, through my experience of life, through my childhood, through my parents, the way my parents communicated to me, through the way my teachers communicated to me. It has to go through my whole life experience before it gets to my heart. And so there are things going on in here that could completely misinterpret what that person is saying, even though they meant to do it in a super pure way. And so a great example of this is Steve and Wendy talk about this, that when they first got married, Steve's love language, which we're actually going to talk about love languages soon, but Steve's love language, is acts of service. And if you're around Steve for any amount of time, you will know that that's the truth. He's so kind. I used to be the resource coordinator, and so they keep a bunch of books and products in their garage. And I would go over to their garage, and to my true horror, Steve's garage had a ton of spiders in it, which is, normal for a garage, but I couldn't cope. I hate spiders, and they were everywhere, and they would gross me out. And I'm like boxing up books and like not losing eye contact with the spiders, because I'm like, you better stay right there. I was so stressed, and I kind of jokingly mentioned it to Steve. From then on, there was never another spider in the garage again. Every time Steve knew I had to come over and pack up books, he got rid of the spiders. It makes me a little bit teary, because I just see like how he was like loving me well in that moment. And he's like, oh, I really care about Ash. He's more than just an employer. He's family. He's like a spiritual father in my life. He and Wendy are both spiritual parents to me. And so he like took ownership of how I was doing and went above and beyond what you would ever expect a boss to do. And he got rid of the spiders. And so you can see Steve does those kind of things all the time, where it's the overflow of his heart comes out in acts of service. If you've never heard of the 5 love languages, it's a whole book. It's beautiful, and it's actually very impactful. Like I said, we're going to talk about it in a second, but I'll hit on what the 5 love languages are now. So acts of service, which is, like I just mentioned, doing things for other people, taking things off their plate. Words of affirmation is another one. So you're so beautiful. You're amazing. You're doing such a great job. I see all the hard work. You mean so much to me. Those things. And then gifts is another one. So bringing home like a little surprise snack because you thought of someone today, like little thoughtful things. It doesn't have to be fancy or expensive. And then 4 is quality time. That one kind of speaks for itself, making time to spend with someone, even if it's just going for a walk or watching TV together, even that can touch that. And then finally, physical touch. Again, super clear. So even just like a hug, it doesn't have to be like super intimate physical touch. Obviously, with your spouse, that would be physical touch in that area in an intimate way. But for other people, it can be like a little hug, a pat on the shoulder. Those some people that's really big for them. So for me, my primary love language definitely fluctuates with who it's from and what season of my life I'm in. I've learned quality time is major for me, and it's so funny. I used to think it was my last one, so I think that's allowed to kind of fluctuate throughout your life. But it's good to be aware of what actually touches your heart. And so for example, kind of going back to the example of Steve, Steve is an acts of service person. That's how he loves people. It overflows in such a clear way. And so Steve used to wash the dishes for Wendy when they first got married. The after dinner dishes, Wendy would often leave them to the morning, but Steve actually went to wash them before bed. And in Steve's mind and in his heart, he's thinking, oh, I love Wendy. She has so much on her plate. So what I'm going to do is take care of these dishes for her. Pure heart, right? Best intentions ever. Adorable, amazing husband. But what Wendy received, which I actually can really understand where this comes from too, I understand both sides. Wendy took that as he thinks I'm a horrible housekeeper. He thinks I'm a really bad wife. He thinks I'm lazy. And so he feels like he has to step in and wash these dishes for me. Such a great example, right? Where he had a super pure heart, but Wendy also, she wasn't doing anything wrong. It's not like she was horribly misinterpreting it. Even though she didn't receive it the way he wanted to, she had lenses that she was seeing life through about what a wife's responsibilities are supposed to be. And maybe I don't actually know this, but that just as a general example, she could have had passive aggressive people in her life who didn't clearly communicate what they need. And so she is assuming that if someone has a problem with me, they're going to subtly communicate it, not use their words to tell me. And so perfect example, super pure heart, still received the wrong way. And just being aware of this really helps because it lets everyone be free to have their own process. Luke can say something super kind to me and I'm still allowed to have my feelings hurt. That doesn't mean I blame him. And this is the important part. It goes the other way too, that just because I'm hurt by something doesn't mean you had a bad intention. Just because something hurts my feelings or I wish you would have done something differently doesn't mean that you were trying to hurt me. And keeping this in mind is so important because it helps us remember we're on the same team and we don't have control over the other person's reactions. We can do everything as perfectly as we want. And many people even recognize this, that you can have an amazing day where lots of good things happen, but you can still on the inside have a bad day. Like externally, you can oh man, I have extra money today. I didn't think I would have that money and somebody bought my coffee. And you can have a lot of good things happen in the day, but still on the inside have a bad day. It's kind of the same thing where it's like actually there's stuff going on inside you that only you get to have control of. Only you get to process those things. So that's number one. Kind of went in great detail with that one, but don't worry, they're not all going to be this long. So number one, again, was you can have great intentions and still hurt each other. This is just super practical to be aware of. Number two is actually about love languages. So we've already talked about the 5 love languages, but just knowing your love language is incredibly helpful. And I think something that's actually been helpful for us is to dig a little bit deeper. And so instead of just labeling things one of the 5, we actually dig deeper into what specifically loves my heart well. And so instead of just saying I'm gifts, just get me gifts, I say that when you randomly bring me flowers, when I haven't mentioned wanting flowers because you just happen to think of it and you're on your way home from work and it's super inconvenient for you to stop at a store, but when you show up at the door with flowers for no reason, that makes me feel so loved. That's a lot more specific than just gifts. And it doesn't have to be that way, but we've found this super helpful. And another thing is like the random things that might not even sound like they fit in a category. Um, it's like actually kind of funny sometimes to learn what touches our heart. I'm listening to an audio book by Brene Brown, and I'm gonna actually pull up the title really quick because I forgot what it's called. But it is called Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. And oh my gosh, this book has been so impactful for me. I'm not even halfway through it yet. But one of the things she talks about is her daughter in school. They have one of her teachers has I think she puts marbles in it. It's basically called like a trust jar. And every time the student builds trust, they put more marbles in the jar. And then if the students in the class break trust, they take marbles out. And so basically, it's to teach kids how people can like earn to be closer to you, and how you learn to build trust and how trust can be broken. It's actually a really great relationship skill for kids. And so Brene Brown's talking about she's asking her daughter, what's a way that you've had a friend in your life build trust? And so she's expecting this like major story of like her daughter's friend being super heroic to earn her trust. But actually, they were sitting at a game, like a sports game. I don't remember what sport. That made me sound really at a sports game. I think it was baseball, some kind of game, at a sports event. We'll put it that way. And her friend was sitting beside her, and Brene's parents arrived, which is her daughter's grandparents, and her friend said, "Oh, there's your like nanny and papa or something, whatever they called them." And her daughter said that built trust because she remembered what I call my grandparents. The smallest little moment. Isn't that so sweet? That actually really stuck with me because I realized those really are the moments that build trust. It's the small things where you remembered this about me. Oh my gosh, I told you that like in passing a year ago, and it really stuck in your brain. You considered me. You thought about me in this way. You remember what I call my grandparents. That means so much to me. Those little things and paying attention to what affects our heart. First of all, that's just good information for us because we learn more about ourselves and what we need to feel loved. But secondly, communicating that to our spouse specifically, because I think a lot of times with flowers, for example, at first I didn't want to tell Luke that I wanted flowers because I thought if I tell you that I want flowers, then you're just going to get flowers because I say I want flowers, not because you want to get me flowers. And I don't want flowers because I say I want flowers because I could just go buy flowers myself if I really wanted flowers. But what I want you is to think about getting me flowers and bring them home, which sounds hilarious. So funny. But I think you guys know what I mean. I don't want him to get them for me just because I asked. Otherwise, I could just go buy them. I want him to get them because he thought about it. And so I didn't want to communicate it. But what has really helped is thinking, hey, I'm going to communicate to you. Flowers really touch my heart. This like does something in my heart. I don't know how to explain it. It's so like kind and random and thoughtful. And so if I mention it to you, I don't want you to bring them home tomorrow because that would feel like you just are doing it because I asked. I'm telling you for the future, sometime in the next 3 weeks, I don't want you to bring them tomorrow. I want you to bring them in a day that you think about that. Yeah, exactly, Sarah. It's obligation that way, and that's not as fun. But communicating it generally and saying, hey, this touches my heart. I love when you do this. That gives them space to remember to do it again. So that way they're not having to read our mind. But at the same time, they're not just doing it only because we asked. Like there are ways to communicate without them running off to the store and buying flowers, which feels kind of yucky, right? So I think that's even a great question to ask ourselves. What's something recently that a friend, a coworker, a parent, a sibling, a spouse, what's something someone has done recently that's small that made you feel really loved? I'm even going to just like, wait a second. Just ask yourself that. Something small, something thoughtful. It's so funny how those things touch our heart, but I think paying attention to what those things are, that can mean so much. A great example for me is I love plants, clearly. I have like a plant addiction. It's a problem. I love plants. And so every morning I open all the blinds in the house. I just have this closed so there's not a glare, but usually these are open. All the blinds are open. So that way my plants get maximum light. And so I have kind of a ritual where I open them up every morning and then at night I close all the blinds so that way the house feels like safer and nobody can see in. And lately, Luke has actually been opening the blinds and he'll put my plants on the windowsill for me. And then at night, he'll take them down and close the blinds if I'm doing something. And it's so funny because that has actually made me feel so loved. It's such a small thing, but he knows how much I care about my plants. So he wants to help make sure that they get the light they need in the daytime. And so he helps me open the house and he helps me close the house. Such a tiny thing. And this one I didn't even ask for, and he just did it. And I think paying attention and even asking the question, why did that specific thing touch my heart? What is it about that? Like, it's kind of random. So why? What like need is this meeting in my heart? For me, it's I care so much about my plants, and a lot of times I felt like I've had interests that nobody cared about and that people thought were strange. I have a tendency to kind of hyperfixate on things, and so I don't just have a casual hobby. I learn like every fact about that hobby and I get really intense. And I've actually experienced people being kind of like, "Oh, that's a lot. Like you're a lot," by how excited I get about things. And then to have someone like my husband be like, "Oh, you love that? I love that too. That's awesome." And then actually put in effort, practical effort to help me care about the thing I care about. That's why that touches my heart, because I feel supported, I feel seen, and I feel understood. And so I think just asking, why does this thing impact my heart? This is such good information about us, and it really applies to most of our relationships. And okay, number three, so the first one, you can have great intentions and still hurt each other. Number two, knowing your love language and what builds trust is very helpful. Number three, body language, deep breaths, and soft voices really help de escalate bumpy conversations. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, Luke and I, our call, video. I'm so used to Zoom. I'm like, I feel like we're all chatting right now. At the beginning, I mentioned that Luke and I call what some people would probably call arguments. We call bumpy conversations because we usually do them pretty well. We've never had like a big blowout fight, but we do have times where it's like, man, my emotions kind of high. Whew, I'm feeling a little frustrated right now. I'm feeling misunderstood. We've had those times, and like I said, I think it's actually healthy. I think it shows that we're letting people get close to us. If there's times where we're really hurt by someone, if no one's close enough to hurt, if we never get hurt by someone, I wonder if we're even letting people close enough, because people will hurt us. That's what relationships look like. That's what closeness looks like, is to actually give people space to affect you, whether positively or negatively, and nobody's perfect. So we have learned that actually our body language and the tone of our voice affects how we feel. And so we might be in a hefty, like a conversation that's gone on for a really long time and emotions are starting to escalate. It can be really easy and almost feels natural to get a little bit louder. It's not that we're wanting to yell, it's that our emotions are getting a little bit higher. And I'm trying to explain this to you like that. And I think it's natural. I don't think there's necessarily anything horrible about that. But we have learned that actually, if we actually pause, and usually one of us will take the lead on this, like, hey, let's take a deep breath and we'll both breathe. Pause for a second. And sometimes one of us will even go into the other room to do that. If it's like, okay, I'm so sorry. I actually am just going to take a second, go to the other room and do that in ourselves if we're feeling high levels of frustration. And then actually adjusting our body language, taking a deep breath and talking softer, it blows my mind how much that affects the conversation and how much more effective the conversation is at that level. I think that's just a great communication tool, because I think when we are experiencing our bodies actually escalating and making ourselves bigger and louder, it actually is representing that we feel threatened. But if we, through our nervous system, actually take a deep breath, reset, and bring our body back down to a neutral level, then we're communicating the threat's gone, no threat, we're on the same team, let's continue to talk this out. And we've actually never left a conversation without completely resolving something. And I think that's been one of the greatest keys for us, which is just awesome, because I grew up in a family where there was a lot of yelling and a lot of really unhealthy communication. And so getting to be in a marriage and see how effective it is, that actually we don't have to get to the point of screaming at each other. We don't have to get to the point where we need 3 days to recover, or somebody has to go on a drive and come back, at midnight after they finally calm down. We don't have to bring other people into it. We can figure this out. Let's just take a deep breath, and we're not going to get up until we're done, but we're going to talk soft. And a lot of times, even though this is sometimes the last thing you want to do when you're feeling frustrated at someone, we just grab hands, because that physical touch just reminds our brains we're on the same team. Don't forget, we're on the same team. And that's a super helpful key for communication. Okay, number 4, we're almost done. Number 4 is emotions change, love doesn't. So this is something that's Luke was my very first relationship, and like I said, I grew up in a pretty unhealthy family, and my parents got divorced when I was 13, and then my dad left. It was like very, very, very chaotic, and so um, I didn't really know a lot about what a healthy relationship, especially marriage, was supposed to look like. And so, what I learned mostly about marriage and about love came from Hollywood and came from movies. And I wouldn't have said that. It's not like I'm watching a movie, taking notes and thinking, oh, this is how my marriage will be. But just the way we're influenced by what's on the screen really influenced how I saw love. And so I remember our Stephen Lorraine Box, our premarital counselors, told us there will come a time where the love high, the emotion, the high of like the falling in love, crush kind of emotion, is actually scientifically supposed to calm down because that's not something that's sustainable. It's like excitement, it's adrenaline, it's something new, but that eventually is going to settle. And a lot of people think that means you're falling out of love. That's not what that is. That's actually not supposed to be like that hormone, that feeling, that emotion is not something that's supposed to stay forever. It's actually not sustainable. Excuse me. So when that goes away, don't freak out because that actually means something much deeper, which means choosing each other, is born. And that doesn't mean we don't feel feelings of love. Oh my gosh, I feel mushy feelings all the time towards Luke, but it's not just this constant euphoria that you feel when you are in a new dating relationship or newly engaged. I think if any of you have been married, you probably recognize that, where it's like there's this feeling of like, I could never feel anything but total love for this person. And then you get married and you're like, wow, marriage almost feels a little bit flat today. And I remember the first time I felt that, I actually started to kind of freak out a little bit because of what I'd seen on Hollywood. And the words of my premarital counselors helped me so much because I went back to that and I remembered, oh, yeah, this is really normal. Everything's okay. And I have learned anytime I start to feel anxious, anytime I start to feel like I want to maybe even like distance myself from Luke, because there's times I actually talked about in the marriage conference that I struggled a lot with relational anxiety and the fear of intimacy. And so when someone's close, I had walls that came up and I really wanted to protect myself. And so every once in a while in marriage that will happen too, where I'll suddenly feel like, oh, I want to push you away a little bit. When that happens, at first I would freak out because I would think, oh my gosh, there's horrible problems in our marriage. We're probably getting divorced. I'm not feeling mushy feelings of love right now. I'm freaked out. This is the end. This is what happens in movies where they say they're starting to fall out of love with someone. It's happening. But actually, what I tell myself now is this is going to change. I'll probably feel super mushy about him in just a couple days. I'm all right. I'm going to do what I need to help myself feel peaceful, and I'm going to just lean in to my husband. And sure enough, and it's not me trying, it's not me manipulating my emotions, it's not me trying to force something to happen, but just organically, there will be a couple days later where Luke will do something that just completely melts my heart, or we'll go on a date. We actually have to build and establish and put effort into our connection because it's not something that just magically happens. It's something that we get to sustain. And it's the same with our relationship with the Lord. It actually really helped me to compare my relationship with Luke to my relationship with God, because there are days where sometimes I'm not really feeling God a ton. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. There's days where I'm like praying and it's not that I'm having this like crying encounter where I got this crazy word. There's sometimes where there's other times where maybe it almost feels kind of boring. I'm like, man, nothing like wild is happening. I'm just reading my Bible and I'm trusting you're there and everything's good. And so I think it's like really important to remember that just because you feel something today doesn't mean you're falling out of love. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. It doesn't mean your marriage is over. It doesn't mean that your friendship is over, because that can change. Your feelings are super flexible and it's really good to pay attention to them, but they shouldn't be the one driving the car. Your emotions are not actually the ones in charge. We want to know what our emotions are saying. That's a good indicator of how we're doing. We want to check in with ourselves, but to let them actually dictate what we do, especially in a covenant relationship, is extremely dangerous. And that's what's portrayed to us by Hollywood, quite frankly, is that however I feel, is how committed I am to you. And it's almost like laughable how opposite that is from the kingdom. Covenant relationship means no matter what I'm feeling, no matter what mood I'm in, I'm sticking with you. And I don't fall out of love, because love isn't an accident. Love is actually a choice I make every single day. I love my husband, and there's days that it truly feels euphoric. And I think there's nothing in the entire world I want more than to just be with my husband, just watching TV. I am in love with this man. I feel in love with him most days. There's also days where it feels a little normal, and it can almost feel a little bit like housemates, where we both have a busy day and we're just kind of passing each other, and we go to bed together and kiss each other goodnight, and we're like, all right, have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow. But that does not stay the same. And again, it would be a little bit worrisome if that was our norm, if we were hardly seeing each other and weren't making time for connection. But we had a busy day, but we have a date this weekend. We put things in our path that actually cultivate connection and reestablish those feelings of choosing each other again. And so we put those things in our path. We have plans, we have structure and strategy to keep our connection alive. And so when those feelings come up, it's actually not scary anymore. I think that it's actually just part of humans. Sometimes I feel bored. Sometimes I feel really mushy about my friends. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Michelle is my favorite friend in the whole world. I love her so much. I'm so grateful for her." And other days, I actually totally forget to text her, or maybe we have like a little bit of a bumpy conversation in our friendship and things feel different. We can't rely on our emotions to tell us what we're doing in our covenant relationship. So crucial. And it makes me want to just talk about it a lot because I got that from Hollywood. And I'm so grateful for our premarital counselors and for the people in my life who prepared me to not freak out when our emotions shift a little bit. Okay, and number 5, having someone this close to you is catalytic for your growth. I think this is one of our favorite things about marriage right now is how much Luke and I are growing as people. It's really exciting to see that we're not just growing in our marriage, and we're not just two separate people who are married. And it doesn't just cost us to be married, it's actually benefiting us greatly. We are better people married than we were single. I'm not saying this is the case for every relationship. I know there are some people who are called to be single, and I know there are some people who are single and who are thriving. God is actually the one who develops us. God is the one who gives us growth. He's the one who leads us to where we're meant to be. So I'm not saying that if you're not married, you can't grow like this, but this can apply to siblings. This can apply to best friends. This can even apply to counselors. But having people close to us, not saying it has to be a spouse, but having someone this close develops you faster than anything because you have someone near enough to see the best parts of you. My husband sees what my major strengths are. He sees strengths that nobody else has really even noticed about me. Some of the strengths he tells me is new feedback. I didn't even know I did that well. I didn't even know I was so good at that. I didn't know that I was so strong and brave. And you're like seeing these ways that I'm brave that I never even noticed. And it's really impactful because they're ways that nobody else gets to see your strengths. But then there's also, they get to see your weaknesses. They get to see some of the hardest moments of your life. They get to see where you're really struggling and what kind of things, how are you when you have a bad day, how are you in traffic, that kind of stuff. And having someone actually be able to see the full picture of you is incredibly impactful because they can also give you the kind of feedback to help you grow. Luke and I just had a conversation last week that was really, really catalytic for him because there's a weak spot, which he has very few weak points. It's kind of annoying, actually. I'm like, can you be like can you like not be such a perfect human? He's truly such a well-rounded person, but we finally bumped into something he's not doing perfectly. Just teasing, but there was something that he kept bumping into. And so I gave him some feedback. I'm like, honey, I know that it seems like you have a tendency to do this. But actually, I think that this would be better for you. It's like super simple. It wasn't that, groundbreaking, but he had never heard that feedback before. And when you have someone close enough to see the full picture of who you are, it's wild how quickly you grow. I remember people telling me after I got with Luke that they feel like my capacity to let people close to me grew too. Just having like an emotionally intimate relationship with someone. My friends are a lot closer to me now. I actually was able to break down some walls of where I was protecting myself from love. And it's beautiful because God sees the whole picture of who we are. He sees our worst moments and our best moments, and he has the full idea who we were when we were a baby to the day we die. And he loves us so much. And so I think it actually teaches us how lovable we are to have someone see the good, the bad, and the ugly and actually continue to choose us and love us. It's so powerful. So I'm just going to go over those 5 one more time. So these are 5 things we've learned from being married that actually apply to any relationship. So number 1 is you can have great intentions and you can still hurt each other. Number 2 is body language, number 2 is love languages. And knowing what your living language is incredibly helpful. Number 3 is body language, deep breaths, and soft voices can really de-escalate bumpy conversations. Number 4 is emotions change, love doesn't. And number 5 is having someone this close to you is catalytic for your growth. So those are 5 things we've learned being married. We love being married. Being married is amazing. It's changed our lives only for the better. We've grown so much, and I'm just really excited to see how we continue to grow. So I mentioned this at the beginning, but we just had an amazing marriage conference, and we are going to release the recordings from that soon. So if you guys weren't able to join live, we have some of the best content I've ever heard on marriage and relationships, and that includes for people who are single, people who are divorced. It's amazing. So I hope these 5 keys were helpful for you. Like I said, if you guys are watching this later and have keys that you want to drop for communication, even marriage tips in the comments, go ahead and drop them. I think this is just such a great place to hear from each other and hear what other people are doing well. What are you doing well in your marriage? What have you learned about yourself? Love it. Guys, we're so happy that you're a part of the Igniting Hope family. Thank you so much for all you do. We feel so connected to the Igniting Hope family and so grateful for all of you. Truly so grateful. Thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for praying for us. We just love getting to do what we do. It's very exciting. So awesome. Have an amazing rest of your Friday and have a